Shalom, everyone. It's good to be back. And actually, it's as I like to say, the three best lights are the light of the sun to light my day, the light of the moon to keep me awake at night, and the light of the taillights of my grandkids' car as they pulls out of the driveway on Tuesday morning. So I am now, yeah, I put earbuds on. But anyway, I haven't spent as much time doing this week's Parsha, but I have quite a few things that you might be interested in that you haven't heard. I sent some copies of my notes. They're not as complete as they normally would be. I also have a pamphlet that I was using, and this one's by Rabbi Sutton. He gave it to me when I was in Israel years ago. But as you can see, the title of it is Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. And so this is an appropriate lesson to begin to look at them again and talk about them. And I know Rabbi Wolbe spoke about the Mashiach on what, Sunday. And so anyway, I'm going to do it again, but I'm not going to talk about Mashiach Nagid, the negative Messiah. I'm just going to focus on the two because it goes to this week's Parsha. In fact, I'm going to string together three portions of the Parsha, and actually not all from the Parsha. But I want you to first off go to our Parsha, which is Vayigash. And then we're going to I'm not going to read it all to you. So I'm hoping that you'll take the time to read the Parsha itself if you haven't already done so. But I want to really focus in on those first couple of lines. And so as you're looking at it, it begins by saying, then Judah approached. Now the word approached here is supposed to be the word Vayigash. That's what it's supposed to be. But it's not a mistranslation. It's the Hebrew language doesn't translate easily. And so we're going to find some times and places where some things are going to be just okay. If you want to look back at Genesis chapter 18, verse 23, obviously that's not part of the Parsha, but we're going to look at another word that's there in that particular section, and that is the word Vayigash. So in 18:23, it begins, Abraham came forward. Okay, Vayigash. So either he approached or he came forward. Now, in the case in Genesis, it's talking about Abraham approached God. He came towards God. So he's talking about prayer. And so when we look at our first line, we're not necessarily looking at a physical approach, although physicality was involved in it. So it begins by saying, then Judah approached him and said, if you please, my Lord. And the understanding of Lord is going to be interesting. So if you please, my Lord, may your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger flow up to your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. Now, when we go through this, I want to look at the word Lord, because you see the Lord is used two different ways here. The first time it's called Adonai. The second time it's called Adoni. A letter is missing. And that's not unusual in Hebrew, because the missing letters or the additional letters or the large letters or the small letters all have a significance. They all have a meaning to them. And as we're looking at this particular text, we're going to find that as he's talking, if this is not his physical approach, what we're looking at is an actual prayer that Judah is now laying upon Joseph and God. He's talking to them both. You see, this is going to be a specific time where what's going to happen is the fact that I'm going to use the word Bel Tshuva. Baal Tshuva is the idea of master of repentance. Judah is coming to repent. Now, it doesn't sound like it because our language doesn't allow for it. But he is coming in his name to seek repentance from Joseph and from God. He will enter as a man who needs repentance, and he'll leave as a Zadok. He will become very righteous after this set of events. We know about the whole series in the fact that Judah, remember, was responsible for bringing Benjamin down to Pharaoh, or down to see Joseph. And in bringing him down, he understood that his father never wanted him to leave his side. In fact, from the time that Joseph was taken until now, Benjamin has always been with him. He's not been working the herds like the rest of them, but he's always been in the house. And now he's been taken out. And Judah is responsible. And Judah understands that in the past, things haven't always gone the way he predicted they would go. In fact, the last time he left, he didn't realize he would leave behind a brother. So now he's left behind a brother, and he's bringing another brother, and he begins to wonder and question, well, what's going to happen? But that's not the whole story. You see, the story is about two men who are now anointed. Both of them are anointed. Both of them have a purpose. So what we're speaking about is something called the Mashiach ben Yosef and the Mashiach ben David, although we call him Judah in this particular case. So Judah in our story is about this repentant one. And he gained his idea. In fact, there's a parsha, or a section in Soda 34a, in which it says that Judah came to the understanding of what he needed to say because of what Abraham had said to Pharaoh in order to help free his wife, Sarah, from the house of Pharaoh. And so there's over and over again, our three fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have given us advanced clues as to what the Jews will be experiencing and what some of the reactions will have to be. Now, in our story today, there's a Haftorah. Now, a Haftorah is not a half of a Torah. Haftorah doesn't mean that at all. But the concept behind a Haftorah is the fact that it was a tradition in the very beginning where not only was the Torah section read in public, but another section was also read. Someone in the congregation had chosen that reading, and that became part of the Saturday service. Well, in the process, it began to change, evolve, if you will. And as it evolved, it happened that the sages began to say to one another, we need to match the Parsha with the Haftorah, which was a great idea because they're going to be, in the days of the Greeks, they're going to be denied the use of the Torah. And so the Haftorah had to supplement what the Torah was saying. And so this Haftorah portion becomes very significant now, because I want you to turn to the book of Ezekiel, and I want you to turn to chapter 37, because this is where our Haftorah comes from. Now we're going to look at, there's two sections to chapter 37. One is the section of the dry bones. But I want to look at the second section, the section that deals with the sticks or the pieces of wood, whatever you want to call it. Now, in this particular portion, then, we're going to see it speaks about something that is related to Joseph and Judah. And so that's where we're going to start at this point in time. So start, if you will, in verse 15. Chapter 37, verse 15. Okay? It begins by saying, the word of Hashem came to me saying, now you, son of man, take for yourself one piece of wood and write upon it, for Judah and for the children of Israel, his comrades. And now take another piece of wood and write upon it, for Joseph, the wood of Ephraim. Notice he says for Joseph. Now the reason is because originally when Israel was split in two, the northern kingdom was referred to as the Ephraimite kingdom. And so Ephraim was in charge. And remember, Judah or Joseph was no longer a single tribe, but two tribes. It was Ephraim and Manasseh. But he brings back the word Joseph, and that's significant in our story. So he goes on to say, all the house of Israel, his comrades, then bring them close to yourself, one to the other, like one piece of wood, and they will become united in your hands. And now when the children of your people say to you, saying, will you not tell us what these things are to you? Say to them, and this is where I want to go. Thus said the Lord Hashem Elohim, behold, I am taking the wood of Joseph, not the wood of Ephraim. I'm taking the wood of Joseph. So we're having a contrast between two characters, the character of Judah and the character of Joseph. That's the focus of this chapter, not Ephraim. Now I want you to look over on the right-hand side if you can understand it. And I want you to look at the verse again, only this time I want you to look at the Hebrew verse. So you're in verse Yud Tet. I don't know if you can read that, but in Yud Tet, which is about halfway down if you have an art scroll. And I want you to go, well, let me do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Isn't it good I can count? 17 lines up from the bottom, the very middle of that line. You will find the letter Ein Sadi, a final Sadi. And next to it, you will find the word Yud Vav Samek Fe Safit. That is the word, or those are the words. Now I'm having trouble stumbling over my own tongue. What we're looking at then in this particular portion is the tree of Joseph. An etz is a tree. So this wood has become a tree. Much larger, much more pronounced. Now, if I were to do what in Kabbalah is called a gematria, I would begin to add the value of these letters, of these two words, etz, Yosef, and I would find it would equal 183. Great. Is there anything I can compare that to? Yes. It's the same value as the word we started with, Vayigash. This is how they're going to be compared one to the other. This text that we're reading fits to our Parsha reading. This is where the sages gained the idea that this is what we're supposed to be looking at. Now, I want you to go, you're going to come back here. So I want you to go to the book of Amos, which is further back. It's the second of the 12 prophets. And I want you to go to the 9th chapter of that book. Yeah, well, I guess it's not the second one, it's the third one. Chapter 9, and I want you to go to the very end of chapter 9. You're going to go down to verse 13. Aren't you glad you got more than 2 fingers so you can go through the Bible? If you got an art scroll, you're on page 1369, if that will help you any. And we're in the 13th verse. It begins by saying, behold, days are coming. Behold, days are coming. So this is future. This is not present. This is yet future. The days are coming, the word of Hashem, when the plowman will meet the reaper, and the treader of grapes will meet the one who carries the seed. The mountains will drip juice, and the hills will melt. It's a metaphor. Well, what am I supposed to gain from this metaphor? Well, the rabbis tell us that we're missing something if we forget who is a plowman and who is a reaper. So let's go back through the sentence again. So this is yet future. And it says that the plowman, one who's churning up the ground, will meet the reaper, meaning they will both be in the field at the same time. That there will come a time in the future when the harvest will be so great that they will not be able to get all of the grain out of the field before they have to start planting again. That is where this is going. Not only that, the grapes will be so large that the grapes will be coming off the vines at the same time they're planting more trees in order to get more grapes. The world will no longer see a shortage of food. Food will become plentiful. Now, the question is, when is this going to happen? Well, if you go back up further up in the text, and I want you to go to verse number 11, notice what it says. On that day, I will raise up the fallen booth of David. I will repair their breaches and raise up its ruins, and I will build it up as in the days of old. What's the fallen booth of David? David never had a booth, but he did use a booth once at Nob. Remember when he was starving and his men were starving with him? He went to the Levites and he asked for the holy bread. That's the tabernacle. That's the booth that we're talking about. When I was in Israel the first time, Larry and the others took me up on top of a mountain. And it was an interesting mountain because as you looked over the top, you could see the northern end of the Dead Sea. And there at the northern end of the Dead Sea was the place that they call Gilgal. That's the place where the Israelites crossed the Jordan into Israel for the first time. Now, when they crossed over to Gilgal, they spent years there. And they chose to keep themselves in tribes, clans, if you will. And so they built what was called a getter, which would be a knee wall to separate one clan from the other. The same thing was done when they were at Mount Sinai, and God did not want them to go onto this mountain. So he had them build a knee wall to separate them so they would not die by touching the mountain. Well, this knee wall then is what he's talking about here. And I will repair the breaches and I will raise it up. 1967. In 1967, there was a 6-day war. In that 6-day war, there were minefields planted across the area. In fact, Gilgal is the place where a giant minefield is today. In fact, if you go past it, you will find signs that say no, well, you can't read it, but it says no trespassing, minefield. So what is today a minefield at the original time was the home for the Israelite nation. In 1967, they drove a truck through there to clear a path so that they could move troops down to the Jordan River, because the Jordanians were firing across the river into Israel. And so in order to get closer, they broke the wall. They breached the wall. The wall is still broken. And from the top of the mountain, you could look down and you could actually see the breach in the wall. And so as we're thinking about this, the time has not yet come for them to repair the wall. The wall will be repaired just before the next verse happens. The fruit, the food, all of that is happening. All of this is about the last days. This is about the days of the end times, as we would call them in Christianity. This is what the world will be coming to. Prior to this, we go back to Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel chapter 37, what are we now looking at? We're looking at the nation coming together. That coming together of the nation then is very significant because it's one step closer to the coming of the Messiah. Now, as we go through this whole process, then what we're looking at is yet future, but we're given enough description that we begin to understand some of the things that are happening and some of the things that will happen. Now we have what appears to be, as Joseph and Judah meet up, we have what we would call two anointed men. You see, the word Mashiach doesn't mean Christ. It means anointed. If you go to Isaiah 45:1, you will find out that Cyrus the Persian was a Messiah. He was anointed for the purpose of allowing Israel to return after the Babylonian captivity. So there are 38 other places where the word Messiah is used. 31 of them are found in the book of Leviticus, and it refers always to the high priests and to the Levites. So Messiah is not the magic word that we used to think it was, but it helps us to identify and clarify somebody who has a special task. And this special task is what causes them to be called a Mashiach. Now, in our story of being the Mashiach, we have two of them. You see, in the beginning, look at Joseph's purpose in life. Joseph obviously was a righteous man from the very beginning. He chose to avoid situations where he would find himself in jeopardy. In fact, when he came to the point of time where he was caught in the house with Potiphar's wife, the first thing he did was he ran. In Hebrew, that same word is used for harvesting, to pull away, to uproot. Joseph uprooted himself from that situation. He pulled himself away at that point in time. Joseph remained the anointed one. He remained the Messiah. He remained that character that was a true Zadok. Now, in my own life, I would have very difficult time matching Joseph. You see, I still haven't pulled away from the world. I still have things that keep me apart from God. I'm working on it, but I have those things. But when I look at the character called Judah, Judah is an interesting character. We know about Judah's flaws. They're published everywhere. In fact, we know the one flaw where he refused to give his third son to his daughter-in-law, Tamar, in order to have a child. And so how does God correct that? God causes her to become a prostitute. And at that point in time, Judah looks upon her and they has a relationship. And that relationship creates two children. And one of them becomes the lineage for David. You see, there's a lot of times when people don't always do the right thing, but that doesn't mean they're lost. That doesn't mean they cannot be forgiven. It's called repenting. Teshuvah. And Joseph didn't need to repent, but Judah did. Now, if I'm looking for somebody to follow, if I want to pull myself out of that downtime, who would I want to follow? Joseph, who was perfect? Or Judah, who was like me, who has already figured out how to get out of the problem, how to be so sincere, to come in advance, to walk towards God and Joseph, to beg for the life of Benjamin. Now, it's in that moment in time in which Joseph now becomes tearful, because you see, he understands that Judah has changed. He can see it. Why would he protect this little boy who's not little? Joseph had been in Egypt for 22 years. Benjamin was not a child. Benjamin was a grown man. But yet at the same point in time, he was Jacob's child. And Judah did not want to go against his father. He had already done that once when he sent Joseph away. But now he understands, and now he has grown to understand that he needs to repent. He needed to change. But at the same time, he also asks for forgiveness. Now, in asking forgiveness, he wants to get Benjamin back. Now, remember what happened at this point in time? Well, Joseph breaks down and he tells them who he is. But at the same time, there's now a special relationship between Benjamin and Judah. What kind of relationship? In which territory does God place his holy temple? In Judah and Benjamin. In the tribe of Benjamin, that's the Holy of Holies, or the rest of the mountain belongs to Judah. There's a relationship there that God is now protected. There's times when we need that protection, but we have to come to God. I want you to go back to chapter 37 again, and I want us to look at something else that's there. Look at verse, let's start in verse number 24. In the world to come, my servant David will be king over them, not Joseph. Joseph was too perfect. Not that Joseph was beyond. Joseph would actually, supposedly, according to the sages, will come back, but he will probably die. And in his death will rise up David, or the man who will be known as King David's. I want to add to that. I keep adding, so eventually I'll run out of addition problems. We can turn it into a subtraction or something else. Go to understand this. There's an understanding. Many rabbis believe that the character who will come back is David, or his reincarnation. That David will be the ruler. But look at David's life. If Judah had a problem with sexual problems, look at David. What is the biggest defeat that David saw? It was over his marriage with Bathsheba. Now, it was perfectly legal and fit the criteria of the law, but at the same point in time, what did it leave behind? So as we're going through our story, David then becomes king, not Joseph. Joseph, I would imagine, if there is a replacement. Well, let me back off a second and let me give you an idea of what some have already thought of. 1918 in England, Lord Balfour, declared that there would be what would be called the Balfour Declaration, in which the nation of Israel would be formed, that the Jews would be allowed to return to their homeland to begin the process. Now, Lord Balfour was not a Jew, but Lord Balfour believed that he was a pilgrim. In order for that to happen, he believed that Israel had to go back to where it was before Jesus would come for him. And so he established this. By 1934, the British Empire decided that was no good, and then they decided that they were going to eliminate that, and they created what's called the White Papers. But it had already started. And there was this Ashkenazic rabbi, and his name was Avraham Yitzhak Kook. He became the chief rabbi of Israel. And he started what was known as the Zionist movement. Now, the Zionist movement was not a religious movement at all. In fact, it covered over Rav Kook's main thrust. We will become the Israel that God remembered. But we can't start there because there's too many of us that have never experienced Judaism. In fact, when we look at the prime minister, the first prime minister for Israel, his name was David Ben-Gurion. No, his real name was David Green, and he was from Poland. And he was not a religious Jew. But he understood that in order for things to progress and for this nation to continue, they needed God. And so he made all of his cabinet members rename themselves with Jewish names. So his entire cabinet, none of them were practicing Jews. All of them changed. Now, eventually we had characters like Menachem Begin and Golda Meir and several others who were. But in the beginning, the Zionist movement was just that, a movement to reestablish Zion. Some say with the death of Rav Kook, his movement is still continuing. And this is the Mashiach ben Yosef. He's died, but his movement continues. Others say, no, wait, there's going to be another one coming. But again, that's the nice thing about the Bible. You can always argue over everything. And if there's two Jews in the room, you can always have three opinions. But the concept is the fact that there's this movement going. So as we're looking at our text then, what we're looking at is a type, a skeleton, if you will, an organization that begins the process leading us to. You know, in order for David to be born, do you realize how many evil things had to occur? Abraham started it. He prayed for Sodom to be saved. And what happened? Sodom was not saved, but Lot was saved, his nephew, and his two daughters. What happened? His daughters thought that the world was coming to an end and that there would be no population left. So they had a relationship with their father to create, well, the first one created Moab, and Moab in generations later would create the character called Ruth. Now, did God slip one in on Satan? But that's not the only one. We see there's other instances along the way. Tamar and Judah, an illicit relationship. But from that illicit relationship, we had Peretz, who was also in the lineage of David. God throughout time has used what we would consider different means to get people to allow for righteousness to rule. That is not to say that we should practice the same thing. We are not God. God can figure that out. God can make it work. We can't. So as we're living through our lives, we have to understand that our lives have to be moving towards God, just as Judah understood. As he approached God, he came towards him, and he came towards Joseph. We in turn come towards each other. Now, it's not in physical way, because obviously we're in different parts of the country. But the understanding is that we are drawing closer to one another as we begin to study the Torah deeper. That's what's going to happen. Now, if you go back to the text where we started, in verse 24, it says, "And my servant David will be king over them, and there will be one shepherd for all of them, and they will follow what? My ordinances, and keep my decrees and fulfill them." Now, who's going to help him? It's the Josephs. You see, Joseph truly understood the Torah before it was given. He knew the ins and outs. David knew a great deal, but he was always questioning, always trying to draw closer. Joseph seemed to know from the beginning. "And they will dwell on the land that I gave my servant Jacob, and within which our fathers dwelled. And they and their children and their children's children will dwell upon it forever." Notice, "And my servant David will be the leader, the Nasi, the prince, for them." For how long? Forever. "Now I'm going to seal this covenant of peace with them, and it will be an eternal covenant with them. And I will emplace them and increase them, and I will place my sanctuary among them forever." And actually, the word "among" should be upon the mountain. "My dwelling place will be among them," or upon them, "and I will be a God to them, and they will be a people to me. Then the nations will know that I am Hashem, who sanctifies Israel, when my sanctuary will be among them forever." Kind of a short lesson. I only took 37 minutes of your time, but I wanted to give you things to think about and things to question. And I didn't give you all answers. That's not my intention. My intention is to cause you to do what I have to do, and that's meditate. Take time to focus on a scripture. Take time to read a verse and study it and analyze it and begin to grow that way. You see, meditation is the first step towards prayer. It puts you in a position where you have a good reason to be talking with God. Not that you don't have one already, but God doesn't want you to come all the time begging. But he does want you to come to talk with him, to meet him, to be with him, just as Judah met with God and Joseph that day. Come to meet him. Okay. Have time left over, which was my choice and my hope. Does anybody have anything to react to or any questions? Because obviously I didn't fill in every blank.